Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio. Hola Miri, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. From the heart of the city of brotherly love. Les habla Fernando MENDEZ, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Y como siempre, pues noticias locales, regionales, nacionales y mundiales. Empezando por esto del COVID, que no se acaba. Hay noticias todos los días sobre lo que está sucediendo con este virus que destruido nuestra economía y que ha creado tanto desempleo, tantos estragos en las vidas de muchas gentes. Tuvimos la oportunidad de hablar con las damas de la comunidad mexicana, dueñas de negocios, declarando que están trabajando duro para sobrevivir, manteniendo sus familias y sus negocios en medio de una pandemia que ya sabemos los estragos que está causando. Pero, bueno, vamos a ver, por números. Primero que todo, pues, y a propósito de la comunidad mexicana, hay un GoFundMe, un esfuerzo para levantar fondos para la comunidad, así que pueden buscarlo bajo el nombre de South Philly Mexican Business COVID-19 Relief Fund. So look for that. Pero en cuanto a COVID, is the numbers that we compiled some numbers from around the world. Total cases, unbelievable, 112,222,290 cases around the world. Total death around the world, 2,487,766. Now, look at that. It's let's say 2.5 million of people have died in the whole world. Think about the fact that 500,000 have died in this country alone. Compare our population to the rest of the world's population, and you see the high percentage of death in this country. And once more, attributable to the fact that our government did not react properly, did not react in time, did not promote safety regulations. There was no effort on the part of the Trump administration to deal with COVID. And as the Biden people are finding out, and Fauci and other doctors will tell us, in the final days of the Trump administration, there was no effort at all to deal with COVID and the vaccine, even though Trump attempted to take credit for the vaccine when he has nothing to do with it, very little to do with it anyway. But that effort was attributable to the drug companies that were doing great research. Pfizer, as we know, in Europe, Pfizer introduced the vaccine, the first ones in the United Kingdom. So we'll see a little bit later what the number of countries that are going down, and strangely, in some countries, the number of people dying from COVID is still going up. The number of people acquiring the virus is still going up in some places. So in the United States, as we said, the number of deaths in the US, over 500,000. The number of cases is quite high in the United States, 28,261,979. And the total deaths in the US, 502,698 as of now. And those numbers, one of the good news about those numbers in the US and around the globe is in most places, especially in the 10 most affected countries, including the United States, Colombia, Brazil, United Kingdom, Italy, France. This is going down. It is down in terms of numbers in Brazil, in Colombia, in Italy, Spain, United Kingdom, Argentina, and Mexico. The numbers are going down. The numbers are going up in Peru, in India, in Iran, in Turkey, and the Netherlands, among other countries. So, good news that the number of cases is going down in the United States. In many states, in a couple of states, the numbers continue to go up. But overall, in the country, down. Dozens of COVID-19 vaccines are now in clinical trials. We already know we have Pfizer, we have Moderna, and now Johnson & Johnson, which could be that could change the whole panorama of COVID because it is a one-shot vaccine as opposed to Pfizer and Moderna that require 2 shots, 21 days apart for Pfizer and 28 days apart from the first to second shot in the case of Moderna vaccine. The same type of vaccine, that there are all kinds of rumors that are contradictory, but here's what we get from the CDC directly. They recommend the same type of vaccine in both instances. In other words, you should not be getting one Pfizer in the first time and then Moderna in the second one. It should be Pfizer and Moderna both times. Two doses for Pfizer and Moderna. And also, even after you receive a vaccine, the CDC and WHO recommend that you maintain the good habits we have acquired to counteract the effects of the virus, wearing a mask, washing your hands, avoiding close contact with people, avoiding large numbers, large gatherings, etc., etc. So, and wash your hands often and use purifying, alcohol in these liquids that they dispense in many parts. Be sure that whatever sterilizer you're using, that it has alcohol, because that's the one thing that helps with the vaccine. A little bit of bad news. People are still dying in some countries, and now in the poorest areas in this country, as usual, when minorities live, they have difficulty acquiring the vaccine, and so that's been remedied by targeting some of these areas. The not so good news is the inventory is still low, but it's promising developments in terms of increasing that inventory. So Governor Cuomo is in more trouble over reports of deaths in nursery homes. Let's remember that we found out that he himself revealed that the numbers were not reported accurately. And then he wrote a book regarding his dealing with COVID. And now he's being chastised, and probably it will have some effects for him politically speaking. It is a shame because Cuomo was one of those national figures that inspired trust at the height of the crisis with COVID-19. and now he's under attack. So we're going to take a brief pause here in Usa la Media, the Roundtable, la mesa redonda. Les habla Fernanda Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. No se vayan, regresamos en un momento. Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio. Bueno amigos, estamos de regreso aquí en La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable. Les habla Fernanda Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Continuamos con las noticias locales y nacionales, y más tarde noticias internacionales. Pues, algunos desarrollos en ciertos países, por lo menos los titulares de muchas cosas que hemos visto en los medios en cuanto a COVID, en cuanto a desarrollos políticos en ciertas partes del continente latinoamericano. The Wall Street Journal, as we know, the Wall Street Journal is a conservative publication. It's a Republican-leaning newspaper. And many Republicans trust the judgment of the Wall Street Journal. It's a serious publication, so when something appears there, we pay attention. The Wall Street Journal, Mitt Romney, in an editorial, calls Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus plan a clunker. So that means the former candidate to the presidency is not going to support that. Now he's a senator, Senator Romney from Utah. He's not supporting Joe Biden's efforts to deal with the slump in the economy. So, and as usual, because we cannot get rid of news about Mr. Trump, he lashes out at the Supreme Court of the United States. The decision in reference to his taxes, the Southern District of New York will have access to that information. Is something that he has resisted for a long time. Unlike most presidential candidates who presented to the nation their tax information, who reported it to the nation, were not hiding anything, Mr. Trump from day one has refused to release his tax returns. We have some information. We know, for instance, that he didn't pay taxes for close to a decade. We know that he paid a paltry sum of $700, something like that, in the last tax return. And so he must have something to fear, something to hide in terms of his taxes. Again, he's never too far from the headlines. Mr. Trump, not this time, not to his benefit. And here again, our editorial comment in that context is one of surprise, dismay, shock at the Republicans who continue to support Mr. Trump. What is it that he has on them? What information that could do so much damage to the reputation of Lindsey Graham, for instance, and Senator Johnson? Well, he's just an absurd character. He's a caricature, a negative caricature of a Southern politician, with all the things that we know about prejudice and lack of judgment, lack of comprehension of what it means to be poor and suffer in this country, to be a minority, to be a racial minority. So apparently the senator has no understanding, no interest in understanding. And he, like another Senator Kennedy, also another person that I do not understand. Uh, Joe Scarborough makes fun of Senator Kennedy and his cornpone southern accent that gets thicker any time he speaks. For a man who was educated in Oxford and who has the equivalent of an Ivy League education, he has this accent as though he just left the farm yesterday. Um, but his views are really objectionable. And again, he appears to question witnesses in this southern mellow accent, but he has poison when he speaks, so not to be trusted. And the Senate hearings continue regarding the events of January 6th, the invasion of the Capitol by rioters, and it reveals the coordination among several of these groups, the Proud Boys and other groups that apparently they were so well prepared. They had, you know, the right camouflage, bulletproof vests, weapons, and there was testimony from the former head of the security, of the Capitol security, who said that they were not prepared for this kind of assault. They prepare in many ways, but they are not prepared for an assault by thousands of people. They prepare for intruders, they prepare for possible bombers, people who intend to harm senators or representatives in any way, but they do not prepare for this kind of riot as we had on January 6th. And another thing that was revealed during the hearings was the lack of coordination among the different law enforcement entities, from the Capitol to the city police, to the Secret Service, to the FBI. There was no apparent coordination in their efforts to resist the rioters, the people who wanted to take over the Capitol to change the results of the election. Let's remember that that was the goal of the rioters who attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Let's remember, because every day I hear people saying that we should just move on. Republicans, many Republicans, of course, are interested in moving on. Let's not rehash this. Let's not continue to dwell on negative reports of what happened on January 6th in the Capitol. But we have to resist the temptation to just put it aside completely, because this is an event, a historic event, that we were lucky that it was not bigger, that it was not a successful takeover, a coup d'etat, which is what it was intended, when people like Michael Flynn and the pillow man, Mr. Lindell, were telling Trump to confiscate, listen to that, they were telling Trump to confiscate all the voting machines, and in order to change the results of that election, which they even now, to this day, they consider that it was crooked, that it was fraudulent. in spite of the fact that it has been investigated thoroughly, and in spite of the fact that the man in charge, a Republican appointee, the man in charge of watching over the election process, he himself said it was the cleanest election in US history, for which he was fired quickly. And even though Mr. Trump and his minions, Rudy Giuliani and others, went from court to court in so many states, 60 challenges to the results of the election, and they lost basically all of them. They won one challenge that had little to do with the actual count. It had to do with access to the tables where the votes were being counted. That was the only time they won anything in court. So every court, even Republican judges, dismissed ridiculous arguments presented by Rudy Giuliani and his helpers. And I think now Giuliani and the Pillow Man, MENDEZ, are being sued by the company that manufactures those voting machines. And the suit, I believe, like 1.2 billion or something like that. So let's see where Mr. Giuliani finds the money. Anyway, what he is going to be spending money on, Giuliani and all the other crooks who pursued this fraudulent attempt to take over the country, they will be spending a lot of money on lawyers, because they are going to have to protect themselves, not only from the lawsuits as a result of, let's say, the fake investigation of the Bidens in Ukraine, the fake search for fraudulent votes in this country, the attempts to change the vote in Georgia, the false accusations instigated by Giuliani and other people against the Attorney General in Georgia and in Arizona. And somehow, in spite of all the evidence, in spite of all this, I have to wonder, where are the 70 plus million who voted for Trump? Where are they at this moment? Do they still believe the big lie? Do they still believe that Giuliani was right? Do they still believe that Mr. Trump did not instigate the assault on the Capitol? Or do they think that he was right to send his people to attack the Capitol? Because we know he did. There's video showing that he did, and he says, I'm going to be there with you, which of course we know he didn't. So that's important for us to know. And that's why we would not let go of this topic. Spend time on other topics, of course, but this will not abandon. Señores oyentes de Úsala Media, la mesa redonda de Roundtable, les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. No se vayan, regresamos en un momento. Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por Úsala Radio. Señores oyentes de Úsala Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. From the city of brotherly love, les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Bueno, amigos, cambiando un poquito de tema, que, como ya dije, no voy a abandonar el tema de Trump, no mientras él siga siendo una amenaza política, hay que continuar con esto. Pero hay noticias del nuevo gobierno, de Joe Biden. And there's an article in CNN, The Future of the Biden Presidency, the terrain of the midterm elections, and the fate of the Republican Party will all be shaped by a series of early battles unfolding on Capitol Hill. After 4 years of politics by tweeted decree, let's not forget that that's how Mr. Trump ruled the country, by tweeters, by tweets. He used that to bypass the media, the filter of the media. So anyway, after 4 years of that, normal service is resuming inside the Beltway in all its brutal, hypocritical, and high-stakes glory, as everyone with power tries to wield it to set the tone for the coming years. The White House is standing firm behind Neera Tanden, its pick for budget director, though her nomination seems doomed. Why is it doomed? Well, one of the nightmares contemplated by Biden and people around him was that the Senate would end up where it is right now, with a 50-50 split, and that one of those key votes would be Senator Manchin, Joe Manchin, who during the Trump years, appearing dozens of times on television, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, CNN, he seemed to be the voice of reason. He seemed to be a centrist and not selling his vote completely, totally to the Democrats, and questioning the Republican administration. But now, all of a sudden, he's playing a key role in whatever decisions the Senate makes during the Biden years. So that's a bit troublesome. And apparently, he doesn't like Neera Tanden, who's the candidate, the nominee to be budget director. Aides to Joe Biden know this is the big fight that will help to set the terms of the new president's relationship with Congress. Other bitter confirmation hearings are turning into early de facto fights on the great issues of the Biden era, like climate change, expanding access to healthcare. We all know that Obamacare is something the Republicans have tried to undo. Mitch McConnell was instrumental in attempts to dismantle Obamacare altogether. Republicans are, meanwhile, beginning to mobilize against Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID rescue package. Well, part of that mobilization on the part of the Republicans is to get editorials published on the Wall Street Journal and other media attacking the plan, the rescue plan. That rescue package was done in the hope of they're billing as an example of massive liberal overreach and winning a political payoff. That's what they're accusing Biden of doing, that overreaching and of trying to use that as political payoff, distributing money to states and cities. And yet they make a significant gamble. If Biden pulls the country out of the pandemic, okay, that's a big if. The jury is still out. I mean, um, I personally have a positive view of this. I think that Mr. Biden will be able to pull the country out of this situation, this pandemic, with um, the stimulus bill, with the help, obviously, of Congress. He cannot do it by decree. But if he pulls the country out of the pandemic with the help of the bill, the GOP will look mean and irresponsible. The GOP will look mean and irresponsible. Now, that would not be the first time that we judge the Republicans to be mean and irresponsible. All we have to do is look at the last 4 years before Biden came to the White House. And if you want to see mean and irresponsible, that is who they are. So, one of the things they have done, they have postponed the vote or the Tandon nomination. 2 hearings that were scheduled to vote on Neera Tandon's nomination to be the director of the Office of Management and Budget were unexpectedly postponed Wednesday, a possible indication that her imperiled nomination may be being pulled. Senators want more time to consider the nomination. An official in the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee who is familiar with the matter tells CNN. A senior aide on the other panel, Senate Budget Committee, told CNN its hearing also was postponed, and that Chairman Senator Bernie Sanders, an independent who caucuses with Democrats and who has clashed with Tandon in the past, personally informed Tandon on the phone Tuesday about the committee's plan to postpone the markup. So the battle is on because obviously Mr. Biden would like to have the people that he has nominated, he would like to have them actually take their seats and continue to work for the Biden administration to actually take the reins of government in every place where it's necessary. We know that during the transition period, when Trump's administration, the Trump administration was supposed to facilitate the transition, to give all the necessary information to Biden and to his candidates, that they did the complete opposite. They put up obstacles wherever possible. They gave no information. Let's say COVID was one of the things where it was shocking for the people who came in on the Biden team to finally have access to all the information of how little Trump's team had done to combat COVID. And this in spite that they have responsible individuals, such as Dr. Fauci, who was frustrated. We know that as a spokesperson for the administration, he was sidelined at some point because he was contradicting all the statements that Trump was making regarding how to deal with COVID. And at every instance, and this is something that a segment on MSNBC News made us aware of this, that at every instance, Mr. Trump, back in January, February, when the pandemic was beginning, that he was saying that, first of all, that it will go away, but also he claimed that they were doing a great job. My administration is doing a great job. I am doing a great job. That's what Mr. Trump kept saying. We are dealing with this when we know now that they did nothing, that he did nothing because he told us one thing and he told Bob Woodward something very different. So, but that's a well-known fact. So now the Republicans are dedicated to, since they lost the election, since they lost their leadership in the Senate, Mitch McConnell now is on the sidelines in a way. They have decided they're going to block, they're going to make life difficult for Biden, his nominees. So Tandon faces a resistance from Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, a centrist from West Virginia, and a wide array of Republicans who have said they will not back her because of her past partisan criticism aimed at lawmakers in sharp attacks at odds with Biden's pledges of civility and unity. Biden's pledges of civility and unity. So the Republicans are now complaining that Biden is not promoting unity. He's certainly been civil, more so than I would be if I was in his position. Think of what Mitch McConnell did for the past 4 years. Paul Ryan, you know, how they supported all these obnoxious edicts by Mr. Trump. Think of the separation of children. That's one of those things. It's a crime against humanity committed during the Trump years with Steve Miller at the head of that project to separate families. And regardless of the age of the children, that was Miller's decision too. And they sold his bill of goods to Trump, who was worried about keeping his promise to build a wall. So at no time did we hear anything from Trump or the Republicans about unity and moderation. Let's remember Mitch McConnell saying that every legislation that came to his desk from the Democrats that did not have Republican approval came to die. He was the Grim Reaper. That's how he described himself. Civility and unity? I don't think so. From Republicans, listen to Jim Jordan, listen to Senator Kennedy, listen to Johnson. Civility? I don't think so. Stridency, animosity, lack of humanity. That's what I think of the Trump administration. That's what prevailed during the last 4 years. And now they're crying foul because they say Biden is not fulfilling his word. And he has presented as a candidate someone that has attacked him bitterly. Let's see what will transpire from this. But they're actually blocking her nomination to be part of the cabinet. And so this is one of those battles that Biden will have to fight. And she's not alone. I'm sure there are other nominees that the Republicans want to block. Señores oyentes de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo, estamos en la mesa redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando el tablero. Vamos a hacer una breve pausa, regresamos en un momento. Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio. Señoras y señores de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con la mesa redonda. Les habla Fernando Méndez Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Ahora vamos a hablar un poco sobre noticias internacionales. Por un momento, Ecuador. It's a headline about Ecuador where actually COVID has increased, surprisingly enough. Peru, Ecuador, in that region, there are more cases of COVID. And these countries are having difficulty. Well, imagine many of them don't have the medical teams to deal with the pandemic of the size of this one. And they don't have, in many cases, the economic resources to deal with it. So it's problematic. But the headline in Ecuador is about a jail fight, and dozens of inmates are killed in a gang war. Because one of the things that has happened in Ecuador is an increase in the drug traffic. In Ecuador and in Venezuela, because as we heard from our friend Fernando Torres when we spoke about Venezuela, the government has become a narco traffic government, a narco government, more so than even during the previous years of before Maduro took over from Hugo Chavez, and but there were already rumors in that at that time that there was narco traffic in Venezuela that was directed and supported by Hugo Chavez, and then Maduro has certainly made a task out of that. Colombia, the peace court in Colombia says the army was behind 6,400 extrajudicial killings. An inquiry in Colombia has found that 66,402 civilians were killed by the military. Between 2002 and 2008, and falsely passed off as enemy combatants. The number of killings known as false positives is almost 3 times higher than previous estimates. The inquiry is by a special court looking into crimes committed during a half-century of conflict between troops and left-wing rebels. A peace deal ending the conflict was signed in 2016. But we know that segments of the FARC, Fuerzas Armadas de la Revolución Colombiana, and other groups have resisted and refused to surrender their weapons and have continued with the drug traffic and with kidnappings and killings. But this has to do with the paramilitary and other groups that were reacting to the leftist takeover of Colombia. Anyway, as I mentioned before, when I spoke to Fernando Torres about Venezuela, we mentioned the fact that this is a leftover from those years in which the left was very popular in Latin America, and it reached many countries. Even at some point, Chile was governed by a declared Marxist president, Salvador Allende. And we're not going to defend the dictatorships of the right, that were many of them supported by the United States, by military training. But this idea that Marxism is socialism remember that the communists sort of changed their stripes. They prefer to use the word socialist because communists just became difficult to sustain in view of the failure of the Soviet Union. So after the rug was removed from under their feet, the leftists in Latin America were left with no funding from the Soviet Union. And Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro and their ilk were forced to do other things to sort of fund whatever efforts they wanted in terms of revolution. And Chavez obviously used the wealth of Venezuelan oil to continue exporting this Marxist idea. Again, for some reason in Latin America, at some point, if you were not a leftist, if you were not a believer in the message of Karl Marx, the message that communism was the answer, then you were not considered a true intellectual, you were not acceptable at the table. So I don't know how much that has changed, because there is still a lot of that from Venezuela, Nicaragua, Ecuador. We saw what happened in Bolivia. But it will be a very difficult thing to kill that idea that communism is the answer to govern a country, even after the failure of the Soviet Union. And we saw what happened to Venezuela with that form of communism, socialism. Yeah, they changed their name. Socialism somehow is more acceptable than communism, so they changed to socialist. And some of those socialists are using the name progressive also because that is even more acceptable. And how can you be opposed to progress? No, if you attack them, you attack the progressives, you're opposed to progress. So it's all this language gymnastics in order to cover up the fact that there's a philosophy that has failed. There's a philosophy of government that has succeeded, a combination of social responsibility and capitalist free market mentality. And that is what has saved the northern countries in Europe. But that is one thing that has killed societies in Latin America. And we saw what happened. And on top of a failed philosophy of government, to have the scourge of drug traffic, that also has put our countries behind the eight ball, Colombia especially, Bolivia. And we saw that all that ended up making Mexico a place where the drug traffickers decided to, it was closer to the United States, and that would be closer to the market they desire. And one of those figures, El Chapo, was arrested and he's in prison. He's been, now his wife is in the headlines, El Chapo's wife, Emma Coronel Aispuro, was arrested in the United States over drug trafficking. So that's still going on, drug trafficking. And that is something that this country will have to deal with. You know, there's a drug crisis in most major cities. All the challenges of the Biden administration. So we'll have to focus more on some of these challenges in future programs. Aquí estamos en la mesa redonda. Agradecemos mucho su atención en el día de hoy. Les habló Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Los esperamos hasta la próxima.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar La Mesa Redonda, The Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.